On April 4th, 1802, mental health advocate and social reformer Dorothea Dix was born into Hampton, Maine. As a child, her father was a traveling Methodist preacher, a depressed alcoholic, and rarely around. Her mother also suffered with crippling bouts of depression. With her family always on the rocks, she grew up taking care of her two younger siblings, being a makeshift mother of the household. Throughout her early life, she was an avid learner and spent a lot of her free time reading and writing. Although she was only able to attend school sporadically due to potential neglect, at 12 she moved to Worcester to live with her grandmother, who continued to encourage her and push Dorothea for the pursuit of her education. Beginning to advocate for education, she began teaching at elementary school at the age of 14. In 1819, she began to establish schools in Boston and Worcester and designed her own curriculum and classrooms as a young adult. In the late 1820s, her health began to deteriorate, and she began to take more breaks from her career, eventually turning to writing. Her published books, mainly about dictums and morals, sold quickly. Her writing, Conversation on Common Things, published in 1824, was written as a conversation between her mother and a daughter, and it documented her beliefs that women should have the same education rights as men. Due to her grandmother's wealth, she was able to mix with some of the most influential minds of her time, such as Ralph Waldo Emerson and William Ellery Channing. Eventually, in 1836, she had to close her final school due to her deteriorating physical health, as well as a personal documented struggles with depression. Her physician encouraged her to take a trip to Europe with a group of friends. There she met a prison reformer, Elizabeth Fry, and Samuel Tuke, founder of the York Retreat for the Mentally Ill. Her own personal struggles and interests, sparked by other reforms, increased her compassion and encouraged her to take action. In 1841, she began to teach the Women's East Cambridge Prison in Massachusetts. From there, she saw the horrific conditions the prisoners were subjected to. Prisons at the time were unregulated and unhygienic. Violent crimes were often housed side by side with the mentally ill by their jailers. Dix, shocked by the animalistic treatment of human beings, began to lobby and agitate for their improvement. She began to travel to as many prisons as she could access and documented the cruelty of the prison system. Common observations included accounts of prisoners flogged, starved, chained, physically and sexually abused by their keepers, and left naked without heat or sanitation. Dedicated to changing this injustice, Dorothea Dix appealed to the Massachusetts legislature. After presenting these findings, she shocked her audience and began the movement for better treatment of the imprisoned and insane, with goals including setting aside funds for expansion of the state mental hospital in Worcester. She continued her efforts in other northern states such as Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, Maryland, Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina. Documenting the conditions of her patients, she campaigned to establish humane asylums for the mentally ill and founding or adding of additions to hospitals. Dix also attempted to lobby at the federal level. In 1848, she asked Congress to grant more than 12 million acres of land as a public endowment to be used for the benefit of the mentally ill as well as the blind and deaf. In the end, houses of Congress approved the bill, but in 1854, it was vetoed by President Franklin Pierce. Slightly discouraged, she continued to fight for better treatment in Europe. She discovered enormous disparity between public and private hospitals and great differences among countries. She recommended reforms in many countries and, most significant, met with Pope Pius IX, who personally ordered construction of new hospital for the mentally ill after hearing her in-depth report. Later in life, she moved to Washington and began to volunteer at a hospital during the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. She was appointed to observe the vast nursing staff that the war would require and organize an outfit union for Army hospitals. As a superintendent of women nurses, she was the first woman to serve in federally appointed role at such a high level. She was responsible for setting up field hospitals and first aid stations, recruiting nurses, managing supplies, and setting up training programs. Dix had a fantastic administrative skills that were put to good use in order to manage the flow of goods from the north, such as clothing and bandages. However, she often clashed clashed with the administration. She is known for being widely feared and disliked by many of the nurses she oversaw, and after months of hard work, eventually stripped of her authority and asked to leave in 1863. Towards the end of her life, while she continued to travel and work as a social reformer, she grew ill. After contracting malaria in 1870, she was forced to cease her travels, but continued to write and lobby for her causes. Now, leading the widespread movement of reforming of the mentally ill and imprisoned. After a long life as an author, advocate, and agitator, Dorothea Dix died in 1887 at the age of 85 in a New Jersey hospital that had been established in her honor. She is buried at Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and even in the present, her call to action efforts approach to the reformation of the mental health treatment, and imprisonment. Today, we see old hospitals that were redesigned and rededicated according to her ideals, and new hospitals were found in accordance with the principles that she created and shared, solidifying her vast impact on the world around us and even our changing ideals.